G'day YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. And I want to talk about Sydney's Ettihad Airways bombers. I'm sure you will have heard of them. A couple of Lebanese extracted fellas lived in Surrey Hills. And a week ago today, they were arrested by all of the anti-terrorist forces that Canberra and Sydney could muster between them. And the news has come out that Australia's national security police were alerted to the fact that these fellas were up to a lot of no good on Thursday, right? Last week ago. I've been ear-fed dribs and drabs since they were arrested, and as at the moment, here's what I know. Pieced together from listening to ABC Radio FM National Network news and current affairs broadcasts. Now, the story is that these two Surrey Hills Lebanese extracted Muslim fellas decided that they wanted to enlist with I.S.I.L, Islamic Forces of Levant, or I.S.I.S, Islamic Forces in Syria. Take your pick, two acronyms mean pretty much the same. They wanted to enlist with ISIL/ISIS, or as their enemies call them, Daesh. I don't speak Arabic, so I don't really understumble the differentiation. So anyway, they managed to get in contact with somebody high enough up in I.S.I.L in Syria that they were sent instructions, and they were also sent materials, and the materials they were sent comprised of military-grade explosives and military-grade hardware and equipment to detonate aforesaid military-grade explosives. And it seems that these particular two Lebanese Muslims from Surrey Hills in Australia were under instructions that it would be helpful to I.S.I.L if they could plant these explosives on an Ettihad Airways flight or an Emirates Airways flight, because they're owned by the United Arab Emirates, one out of Abu Dhabi, the other out of Dubai. And the United Arab Emirates are particularly in disfavour among the I.S.I.L fighters in Syria. So the explosives were sent by international courier from Turkey, and they arrived in Australia. And these fellas managed to put the explosives together with the detonators into a kitchen food processor or meat grinder. And their plan was that they had a brother-in-law who didn't know anything about all of this bullshit. And the brother-in-law was going to be going out of Sydney on an Etihad flight. So their plot was that after he'd booked his luggage into the cargo hold, they would present him with this meat grinder food processor and tell him to take it back to the Middle East and give it to grandma or auntie or whoever it was who couldn't get consumer goodies wherever they live. However, it was overweight. And on the 15th of July 2017, the brother-in-law said, "Oh, sorry, your meat grinder's not going to fit. I'm not going to pay the excess baggage." And the bomb in the blender was sent back home with the two disgruntled soldiers from I.S.I.L. That's what I get out of it. When they got home, they contacted their controller back in Syria, and they were told, "Well, never mind that. See if you can get it onto a domestic flight, perhaps, maybe, but, you know, like, here's something better. Here's a gas disperser. We want you to build a gas disperser, and we want you to make the poison gas to put in it, And the media in Australia has been talking about hydrogen sulfide, the deadly gas. Well, hydrogen sulfide's rotten egg gas. It's rotten egg gas. Maybe hydrogen cyanide, you know, when they got their chemistry backwards and sideways and upside down or something in translation. You know, if they were going to dispense hydrogen cyanide in a public place, that would be a worry. But hydrogen sulfide, forget it. Who gives a shit? Not a problem. Rotten egg gas, you know, like you can buy stink bombs in Malaysia and bring them back to Australia and let them go in grandstands during football matches. They're fun. You know, as a teenager, I used to buy them off kids who lived in Malaysia. Parents were at Butterworth Air Force Base when Australia projected foreign force. And yeah, they were great. You know, on a through train going through a suburban railway station, chuck out a couple of stink bombs on the platform and watch people diving for cover. Great fun. Hydrogen sulfide, not a problem. Teenage prank. But anyway, 2 fellas are facing terrorist charges. One's still being held without charge and one's being let go. And so why in the name of all of the wattle does that have anything to do with me? Well, here's the thing, you see. Hello, Swamp Wallaby. Will you vouch for my Australianness? Am I Australian enough for you? Hey? By the wallaby and the wattle, I think I may be something like an Australian. Therefore, I reckon I'm allowed to comment on these matters. And here's another reason why I'm allowed to comment on these matters. See, I have more than one wallaby. And I also have a daughter who fancies herself as a little bit of a jet-setting globe trotter, you see. And this is the souvenir she brought me back from her trip to Amsterdam back in March. And this is the souvenir she brought me from her trip to Amsterdam in July. So now that she's back home safe, I can show you the itinerary. Monday the 17th of July, fly out of Sydney on Ettihad Airways flight 455, arriving Abu Dhabi, departing Abu Dhabi on EY77, arriving Amsterdam. And why, pray tell, do you say to me, would that be significant? Well, you see, I find that to be spookily significant because, according to the timeline given out by the police in various interviews and public statements and releases to the press, these 2 fellas in Surrey Hills in Sydney, they got their explosive blender with military-grade explosives and military-grade detonators. They got that all together. And they were planning on putting it on an Etihad Airways flight out of Sydney on the 15th of July, 2 days before my jet-set globe-trotting darling Dottar child actually did get on an Etihad Airways flight and go over to Abu Dhabi. And Etihad Airways operates 2 flights per day out of Sydney. And there were people who said to me, Chris, don't worry yourself. There's nothing for you to worry about in your daughter going overseas to have a holiday. Just because the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are united against Qatar, and Qatar is allied with Turkey, and the excited states of Norte Armed Americano has an airbase on Qatar, which is bombing Syria. And therefore, thus and because anyone who lives in that area may have long-standing, deep-seated family, clan, national, religious, spiritual, cultural ties to any one of 57 different belligerent organisations who, for their own reasons, may have some desire to score a political point by attacking an aircraft belonging to the United Arab Emirates. And, like, therefore, it might be a clever idea to not fly through Abu Dhabi and not fly on Ettihad Airways. But, I know nothing. I'm an idiot. What would I know? I'm a fool for even thinking that such a thing is possible. Ettihad is from UAE, and UAE has a lot of oil, and oil means money, and therefore they're rich, and therefore they can subsidise the airline, and it's the best airline to fly with. Yeah, okay. So about the only thing that seems to have kept this bloke from trying to target the exact same precise aeroplane that my daughter was flying to Abu Dhabi on is the fact that he wanted to go 4 aeroplanes earlier, 2 days earlier. And if she had decided to forego Friday's wages from work because she likes money, then yeah, she could have been there on the 15th instead of on the 17th. And the only thing that stopped him from getting his bomb on the aeroplane, it was not any of the bloody security precautions, and no amount of daily security precautions and vetting and x-raying of the maintenance staff or the baggage staff would have stopped anything either, because the only thing that stopped him from getting his bomb on the plane was he didn't want to pay the excess baggage. And it wasn't the Australian surveillance spooky hoopy-doopy-doos who found him. It was the English surveillance hoopy-doopy-doos who were monitoring the Syrian group that the Australian temper tantrumists were getting their running instructions and their military-grade explosives from. My personal feeling is that after they made a mess of putting the bomb on the Etihad Airways thing, the people back at I.S.I.L gave them a spurious assignment that would be impossible for them to do because they recognised them as a bunch of incompetent fuckwits. But that's just surmise. But, those of you who've been paying attention to my channel for any length of time will no doubt remember that when Tony Abbott sent the Royal Australian Air Force to go and start camping in Dubai so that they could fly bombing missions on ISIL in Syria, I pointed out on my channel that this made me and every other Australian citizen a legitimate target for counter-value operations by ISIL against the Australian population, because I pay goods and services tax 10% on everything that I buy in the Australian economy. Therefore, I am supporting the Australian federal government, which operates the Royal Australian Air Force, which pays all the maintenance and fuel and supplies the ordnance to run the Australian Super Hornets, which are flying out of Dubai and bombing ISIL. So if my government says ISIL is a legitimate target of Australia, that automatically nominates me and mine, including my daughter, as being legitimate targets for ISIL if they want to strike a blow against my government. It gives me the shits. I think we should have had a referendum as a nation on whether we wanted to get involved in a foreign war which endangers all of us. Not only abroad, but at home. My kid was getting on an aeroplane in Sydney, and the arseholes who were trying to blow it out of the sky missed her flight by 4 aeroplanes. That annoys me. Some people might say that makes me a wicked, evil, unpatriotic dissident and a dissenter. But as far as I'm concerned, the only reason my daughter was at any kind of risk in going on holidays in the Netherlands was because she was flying through the Middle East. She was flying on an airlines that is based in the Middle East, and the Australian government decided a couple of years ago to start dropping bombs in the Middle East because that made Uncle Spam happy. Well, it makes me unhappy. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Just before I sign off, I want to reiterate or point out the only thing that kept my kids safe and the aeroplane safe and everybody on all of the aeroplanes safe, it was not Australia's security apparatus, it was not the overseas security apparatus. What kept everybody safe was the creator of the universe didn't want to see a bunch of fuckwits succeed. So therefore their plots and plans were foiled. Because in the God theory in which I place my faith, The creator of the universe is not a fuckwit. Ciao.